I mean, she doesn't really need an introduction, but I am here with the international superstar, fighter for social justice, and a big inspiration on me when I was young, Naomi Klein. Hello.
Owen, so nice. Good to see you.
Blimey, where to begin? Fire. Let's talk about fire.
I'm sort of breaking it up into three fires. There's the climate fires, the literal fires that are burning down entire communities, and all the other ways in which a warming planet is disrupting life on Earth and stealing people's lives, forcing them to leave their homelands. And then there are the political fires, these fires of hate that are leaping from country to country. And then the third fire, and maybe the most important fire, and not maybe, definitely, is our fire, is the fire of these surging movements that are rising up to confront both of those fires, right? And are increasingly coming together into a holistic vision for another kind of world.
What are we talking about? I mean, we've got 11 years left, according to the UN, to keep pre-industrial temperatures from rising 1.5 centigrade above pre-industrial levels. What if we fail? What are we up against?
In terms of the threat level, we have warmed the planet by 1 degree Celsius, and we are already seeing massive disruption and loss of life. You add climate change to any bad situation and it makes it worse. That's something I think we need to understand, and it makes it really hard to pry apart. But people are already losing their homes, and they're already taking unbelievable risks to get to safety. And then they face that second fire, that's fire of hate, those fires of xenophobia, and this emergent model, right, that we're seeing in Australia, and now the European Union and the US has embraced it as well, which is this prevention through deterrence model, where we are supposedly going to deter migration by causing such incredible suffering to migrants that they won't even try. And this manifests as this approach of trying to keep migrants from ever reaching their destination. So in Australia, it's intercepting the boats and sending people to Nauru and Manus, these privatized detention camps. And then the European Union embraced the model and outsourced the patrolling of the seas to the Libyan coast, so-called Coast Guard, which is taking migrants to these brutal camps that I think have rightly been described as concentration camps. And now Trump is doing the same thing, not just building the camps. And I think, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got in a lot of trouble by calling them concentration camps, but what are we supposed to call it? But it doesn't end there. Now what we're seeing is Trump going to Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, and saying, the migrants have to stay in your countries, and this is the only aid they're offering, right? They've cut aid, hundreds of millions of dollars of aid to Central America, and now the new form of aid is, we'll pay you to be our jailers, we'll pay you to build these camps using our contractors, that's part of where we're at.
I mean, what's so perverse is the right-wing populists, the racist leaders, the people you call, quite rightly, the climate arsonists. That's what we're talking about, not just...
I call them planetary arsonists.
Planetary arsonists, sorry, you're quite right. Planetary arsonists.
And I call them climate barbarians.
That's sorry. Gotta get
Okay,
bloody
yeah,
phrases
all
right.
right.
They will have a narrative of, we've got to stop these people coming in. We've got to even, keep out the...
Well, that is their narrative.
Well, of course.
Right, and that's how Trump was elected, build the wall.
But they will stand to benefit even more.
But yeah, the migration is his platform. I mean, this is what he will run on. He ran on it in the midterms, just drumming up all of this hysteria about a so-called invasion, and it's both politically and economically profitable in the short term.
You write in the book about meeting Greta for the first time. What does Greta say as a kind of person, her personal story about the emergence of mass collective action, not least by the young, against the climate emergency?
I mean, I think that she shows, as does Extinction Rebellion, that there was this sort of latent terror out there where people were alone, feeling alone in their own grief and fear. And so I think the power of Greta is just her extraordinary moral clarity, that when she experienced that, when she, like every young person who is confronted with these facts and when she looked around and saw that nobody was talking about it, or almost nobody, and her political leaders weren't talking about it, and nobody was treating it like an emergency, she trusted her first instinct and said, no, like, I'm right and they're wrong. Her story is really, it's also a sad story, right? Because she talks about how she became very ill and very, very depressed when, she didn't immediately become an activist. And I think that's true for a lot of people.
She said, how dare you steal my childhood?
Well, now she has said that. But yeah, she did. I mean, I think she really doesn't want to be doing this. And a lot of the young people who I meet do not want to be doing this.
When I was their age, and I am young, I am older than I look, I'm now 35. But I remember, clinging on to people like yourself as kind of a life raft at the time, because it was the age of there is no alternative. It was the age of the end of history. Is it partly that, do you think, which is why so-called Generation Y, who are going to save us all, is that why they're taking, do you think this has shifted all of a sudden and you're seeing this mass action?
So I think it's a combination of the lived reality and the absolute self-discrediting of the elite class, that they just have shown themselves to be so utterly undeserving of respect, if you know what I mean. I think you do, because, I think Boris Johnson speaks for himself, and as does Trump.
He does, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I mean, this is no joke, in the sense that the most powerful people in country after country are utter buffoons, incredibly dangerous buffoons, but there's no reason to respect institutional authority when people like that are in power. Yeah. There's no reason
kind
you
of
would
caricatured villains almost.
I think when you're young, you just defer to power. Just naturally, you would defer to adults, the people in charge, to some extent, right? But if those are the people in charge, you realize
the kids are the grown-ups in the room.
And they know that, and they are, right? The older generation of environmentalists, frankly, a lot of them still don't get it and are saying, like, why are you, we have so little time. Why don't we just make it about climate, and then we'll worry about racism and economic inequality later, right?
I mean, it is messy sometimes, isn't it? Because mistakes can be made. So take Extinction Rebellion. And Extinction Rebellion in this country, they took action against public transport, an electric train in a working class community. The scenes were not pretty. In fact, a mob descended and one of the was attacked. But that was a real cock-up, wasn't it? A climate justice movement needs to win over working class people and target capital, not the working class.
Yeah, it does. So, I mean, I think my friend Astra Taylor, the brilliant writer and filmmaker, I think had the best response to this, where she reminded people of another way of disrupting morning commutes, which was done during Occupy Wall Street some years ago, where activists engaged in civil disobedience in the subways by jamming open the turnstiles and giving people a free ride.
Exactly.
So, you can be disruptive. I don't know, maybe it's harder to do in the London too, but I think it is really, really dangerous what they did, what those activists did, and I don't think it's a reason to write off Extinction Rebellion, but I think we really need to take it seriously, because we are in a time when working people are unbelievably overburdened under all kinds of ways in which life has just been made more difficult. And so when you layer on top of that a response to climate change, which, by the way, is not going to be a real response, but is going to mean paying more for electricity, paying more for...
Like in France, for example, the so-called carbon tax.
It sets off a huge backlash. So the task of the climate movement in this moment is to prove, we have a heavy lift, we have to prove to working people, after all of this time and after all of these bad neoliberal policies, that it is still possible to respond to this crisis in a way that will actually help working people. Honestly, like, all movements make mistakes, but we don't have time for big mistakes like that.
But I mean, that's what the Green, it's trying to square that, answer that kind of the claim from the right. You just want to destroy jobs, you want to shut down industries. This is just about sacrifice to push a certain agenda, but actually about transforming, creating a just and sustainable society. And that is the message it's trying to push across, isn't it?
Well,
this is about justice for the climate and humanity.
It's not for nothing that this was championed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib and the so-called Squad, because they represent some of the most impoverished districts in the United States, and they were all insurgent candidates who promise to do politics differently.
An election is beckoning in this country. It's going to be a biggie in terms of climate emergency, but not just that. Why? How important is it in terms of the stakes in this election?
I mean, the stakes in this election could not be higher. We have to turn everything around in a handful of years, and we need a few governments that are going to anchor this. And I'm hoping that we have a President Bernie Sanders, or another president who is serious about the Green New Deal, who runs on it. Obviously, my first choice is Sanders. And we need people in the UK to understand the seriousness, the weight of our historical moment, and what it means to get a new government in power, and the only possible new government that would introduce transformative change, and everybody knows it, is a Labour government. So we can't wait for perfect, some idea about a perfect candidate. The stakes of this could not be higher. And it's an all-in moment. Don't fuck around.
Don't fuck about. That could be a great slogan for the general election campaign. Okay. Cheers, Naomi.
Yeah. It's gonna be fine. We're gonna do this.
Thanks, Owen.
I don't know about you, but I actually needed that. It gave me a bit of a lift, cheered me up in our difficult times in which we live, and it just shows that this is a moment of existential crisis, but there is hope at not just taking on the climate emergency, but with it creating a just world, and there are the mass movements led by young people who are going to fight and win. But I want to hear your thoughts. Are you feeling uplifted? Do you feel motivated to do something? Or maybe you just feel despondent? Don't be despondent, but I want to hear your thoughts. And as always, great to see you. Subscribe. I'll see you next time.